Yeah, and speaking of Georgia, what was your opinion on how they responded? Like when you saw the game, like how did you feel their energy was coming back from that tough loss from against Alabama?
I thought it looked good. I mean, the fact that they came out offensively and looked sharp early, which they haven't really done all season, I thought that was pretty important for them to do. And then it was their typical kind of boa constrictor game. And listen, I'm fine with that. That's what I would like to see from Georgia. You know, when they take an opponent and just squeeze the life out of them, because Auburn, and remember this, Auburn didn't have that horrible mistake that they had against, multiple mistakes against Oklahoma, against Arkansas. Like they didn't have that. And Georgia just pounded them anyway. So I think that's a good sign, because I actually think Auburn is better than their record. It's just that they do struggle with turnovers. But I look at Auburn's remaining schedule and like they're playing Missouri and Kentucky in the next couple of weeks. Like they can win those games. Right. They're not bad. Right. They haven't won an SEC game yet, but they're not bad. And the way Georgia responded there was exactly what you'd want to see. So, and the way Ole Miss responded to losing to Kentucky by going to South Carolina and winning, same thing. That's what you wanted to see. So Alabama, you're up.
Okay. So with Georgia, they had two. So you talk about the ball constrictor type game, and they had two really important pieces to that type of philosophy on campus for their recruiting class. One being Usman Chroma, who committed on Saturday, a big physical running back out of Lee County. Then you also have who some people think is the best interior defensive lineman in the country, in Justice Terry. How do you sell that performance to a Justice Terry, who's also considering Alabama?
Well, I think, especially with Justice Terry, you look at Georgia's interior defensive line, it is not as alien laden as it has been over the last few years. There's not a Jalen Carter there right now. There's not a Jordan Davis. So you say, hey, look, you come now, you play now. You can be next in line. You've seen what Trey Scott can develop in this program. And I think it's still a really easy sell, especially because you can watch all those guys on Sunday. You can see how well they're playing, not just on the interior of the defensive line, but like Trayvon Walker had a great game for the Jags yesterday. Like you can see what those guys are doing. And if you're Justice Terry, you can look at what they looked like when they had those guys and what they look like right now. And that's kind of the difference between invincible Georgia and this Georgia. I really think it's one of the biggest differences. Now, I also think Georgia has some issues in terms of, who stretches the field for them without Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers. But on the defensive side of the ball, the difference is really the super special interior guy. And you with Justice Terry, you're like, it could be you, buddy.
Speaking of being able to have those guys who stretch the field and who are able to get the ball to on the perimeter, the way Georgia uses the tight end, they just cycle elite athlete after elite athlete. In their offense, from what you see, do you think it's more important to have an elite tight end as a recruit, or do you think it's more important to have an elite receiver?
I think elite tight end, because there's just fewer of them. The body type's hard. Like the problem with most tight ends is that, or most, future NFL like freak tight ends, they're playing basketball in high school. Like you have to convince them to play football a lot of the time, or they haven't grown into the body that they're going to have to understand. They might even be playing football, but they're playing receiver because they're still pretty fast. They're getting big, but they're not that big yet. And I think that it's a harder position to recruit, just because like the Brock Bowers of the world don't come along all that often. Like Darnell Washingtons don't come along very often, where you just know this is the guy. A lot of times, and that's why you see a lot of the tight ends that do develop, they come from odd places because nobody even realized what they could be, or they got moved to different positions. Or you have a place like Iowa that just knows how to develop. Like they know what they're looking for, but they'll take a bunch of different guys. And you don't know, you never hear anything about the ones who don't become TJ Hawkinson or George Kittle. But they just take a bunch of guys they can project and hope that, because there's a certain athlete that they're going to take.
Mm-hmm.
And the good news for them is some of them may wind up tight ends, some of them might wind up edge rushers, some of them might wind up like inside linebackers.
Right.
They get them and then kind of figure it out.
Right.
But it's hard. It's a hard one. So I'd say tight end, like when you have a blue chip guy,
like Elias Williams. I hope
Yeah.
I'm pronouncing his name right, but they got a 6'7", 240-pound, 5-star tight end on the way. Surprise, it's Georgia. A guy like this, when you see him, and what do you see for a guy like that in this offense?
Darnell Washington.
Yeah.
Like what Darnell Washington was. Now, depending on, because I think Brock Bowers, we kind of have to separate from everybody else because he's just such a freak. And then when most guys don't have that speed. But, you know, if you're 6'7" already and you're 240, first of all, you probably got a lot of people going, are you sure you don't want to play offensive tackle? Like, you sure about that? Got some good feet there. And
Right.
I'm sure Darnell Washington got that. But I was actually watching Darnell Washington play in the NFL on Sunday, and DeMarion Overshorn is like trying to steal the ball away from him on the ground. I'm like, what are you doing? That, like, DeMarion Overshorn is a large person, and Darnell Washington makes him look like a child. So like that's what Georgia needs in their offense, like to have somebody like that who can be essentially a third offensive tackle on the field when they need him to be, but also is athletic enough to catch the ball and especially in the red zone is a big target. I think it's such a huge advantage, and they're so good at using that. You've seen them use that over the years. And like Oscar Delp and Lawson Lucky right now, they fit more of the kind of athletic split out tight end mold. They can play attached. Like Delp's a good blocker, but I would love to have that guy who can just be a beast as an attached blocker, but then you can split him out and some poor linebacker or safety, like, what are you going to do with that? Like, It doesn't matter if you're faster than him. He's still going to catch the ball on you a lot.
I think when they do have those guys who can go up and get it, like Washington's senior year, I mean, or I don't even know if he was a senior, but the year of his draftable year, the year before he got drafted, I think, man, when they started going to him, I didn't realize how athletic he was. And the people were telling me, like, it was like, bro, he's a 5-star for a reason. I think he came from Vegas or something like that.
He was from Vegas. Yeah, he's Bishop. Yeah. I believe Bishop Gorman. He was more athletic than I think people realized. And the problem, like Bowers being in the offense with him made it where I don't think you got to see all of what he could do. If he was on a team that had less talent, Darnell Washington would have been an even more frequent target.
Speaking of loaded rooms, the running back rooms at Georgia are known to be just absolutely loaded. All right, so now they just get this guy, Usman Chroma, big kid. Do you think his ability to run between the tackles is something that Georgia's been missing?
I don't know that they've been missing it, but you can never have enough of those guys. And the fact is, like, we're pretty much past the day. Like, I remember when I was younger and covering recruiting, like in the early 2000s, running backs would be worried about the depth in the room. And I remember Nick Saban was kind of the first one to start saying, as a recruiting pitch, don't worry about the depth. It just means we're not going to wear the tread off your tires before you can go to the league. And I think that's how you have to approach it. Like, if you're Kirby, you're like, listen, I will take as many of you as I can get. We will spread it around. We will not wear you out, but you will get a chance to showcase your talent. Like, I think that's what every elite program coach needs to do in terms of recruiting the running back position. I laughed because I had a dad show me some cards that Phillip Fulmer had sent to the son, who was a big time running back recruit. And this is like late 90s, early 2000s. And it's like, I promise you 25 carries a game. Like, can you imagine if Kirby Smart promised somebody 25 carries a game? The kid would be like, nope, I'm going somewhere else.